Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Idle Hands. So, while reviewing this movie, I'm going to review it in a place of fun. Really, because I find this movie just delightful. It's a really fun, comedic slash horror kind of movie. Really, I'm just going into this review not assuming or assessing that I'm going to make like a million views or a million likes or whatever out of it. Like, for that, I'm just saying, I'm just doing this from a place of fun because I really wanted to watch this movie, realizing how fun that this movie actually was. So, going for this film, people may not remember this movie or remember this movie but may not remember what it's about. Really, it's a movie that is to go into having a person having their hand possessed and having their hand be out of their control, and is all of a sudden starting to kill off people one by one by one. Here is also the thing that people may not be aware of, that there are or is a similar movie to this. If anything, there is a Michael Caine movie that I believe was done in the 80s called The Hand. Really, we had Michael Caine who had lost his hand via a car accident, and eventually that hand comes back to haunt him and kill a lot of his friends and family members. I'm kind of wondering if Idle Hands took that concept, remembering that movie, and decided to do this film, or maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe they had taken it from any number of any other references and whatever, and just decided to have it be a much more comedic appeal with the cast that is kind of designed in this movie. But anyways, so in this movie, to tee it up, so we find that Anton is living at home and he is just a slacker. A guy that seemingly hasn't been in school for months. And so Anton eventually is to eventually have his hand possessed, and without him knowing it, he is starting to kill numerous people without his knowledge. To eventually, when Anton eventually figures and finds out that his hand is actually possessed, then Anton is trying to figure out how to stall his hand from killing others, and try to figure out how to have this hand be incapacitated, tied up, or try to have this hand eventually be subdued somehow by an activity or something that will keep his hands busy. So, with this movie, we have actors like Seth Green in it. We have Eldon Henson, which a lot of people might know him from the Mighty Ducks franchise or Daredevil. The guy who is to play Foggy Nelson in Daredevil, or Fulton in the Mighty Ducks. He is to be in this movie as kind of the duo counterpart to Seth Green's character, which is to be Mick. So, in this film, we have here eventually kind of these dumb guys that are to be put in this horror-like position, and to see this all play out. And they make a lot of mistakes, they make a lot of silly decisions, and eventually that is to cost him, or cost them eventually, throughout this film. So there's some kind of funny moments that are to go on into this movie. I can't help but immediately think, eventually, when Anton is trying to discover that there is a murderer in his house, how him and his dog are to eventually just kind of like go through this house where Anton is basically sliding his dog through the floor to push him into this hallway to to have the dog see if anything is actually there, and then Anton is to grab on to the collar as they are to try to make their way continuously through this house to see where the killer is, or the murderer, or the murderer. So, yeah, I found this movie to just be fun, and like it doesn't matter what happens at the end of all this. After me reviewing this, because I liked this movie, it was so fun. Having Seth Green like going and like, look at me, I'm Leatherface, as then all of a sudden the cord is to come undone. He's like, ah, to have these kind of just funny or just like these little bits that they are to be putting out through this movie is just a real fun ride or experience. And eventually that all heads to eventually having this uh, hand eventually being off on its own and creating its own havoc. And then Anton is scrambling to try and get to it because there's a whole end goal of this movie. So, with that said, I think that's all that I wanted to say in a very cryptic like sense. As you can just tell in my face, like, go ahead and check out this movie. It's a fun ride. If you've never justifiably seen it in your life, go ahead and say that you've seen it now. Currently, at the second of this recording, it is available on an app called Pluto TV. But if you would rather easily just go and not have to subscribe to something or free trial something or whatever, you can probably go through a number of apps and dare in fact find this movie for absolutely free. You can probably go onto an app service that I've been using called C Movies, the letter C and then movies, and find Idle Hands there, or you can go onto an app called Fox HD Movies. The logo will say that, but the title of the app won't say that. It'll probably say like play 1080p movies, and but if you go and search the word Fox HD Movies, that'll pop up fairly quickly for you to be able to watch this film. But yeah, so both of these apps are absolutely free. There's no fee. I'm not trying to like be sponsored by either one of these apps. It's just coincidentally they were just the convenient way to be able to see every single thing of this. So let's get into spoiler territory of this film. I'm going to try to probably wrangle myself in for this review because I feel like for this movie, I'm just going to get so enthralled and so like, ooh, but this moment, but that moment. And I hope I'm going to try as much as possible to not be all over the place with this one because I think there's some stuff that I really just want to get to and just be like, oh, but this line is so cool or this moment is so fun. And I want to try to restrain myself from getting too caught up in the film. So, with that said, I think it's the coveted territory of spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time again to spoil this movie. So, the very beginning of this film is to focus not possessed hand. We are to immediately focus on this man's parents. So, evidently, in the very beginning of this movie is to be themed to be at Halloween. So, evidently, Anton's parents, who is Devon Sawa, heavily decorates their home, and so both mother and father that don't actually have a real legitimate name in this movie, they're just called mom and dad. They are to both go to bed and they are to talk about their son, and eventually the father is to mention like, well, hey, like Anton didn't even help us with like Halloween decorations. What makes you think that he's going to help us out with anything else? So eventually, like they're talking about their son, and eventually they're like going and gonna have a good peaceful rest, and so they turn off the lights, and the mother, while sitting in her bed, is looking up at the ceiling to realize there is a sign that is to mention, I'm under the bed. So the mother is to turn back on the light to make the husband aware there is a sign on the ceiling uh, that is to mention that there's a sign up there that says, I'm under the bed. So immediately we have the father mentioning, it's like, well, maybe it was Anton. Maybe he's playing some prank on us, and like maybe it's some joke of his. And but the mother is like, well, how about you go and check under the bed to see if anything's there? And so the father does, and there's nothing under there. So all of a sudden there is this racket, there is this commotion, and so of course the mom is pushing the father to go back down, to go downstairs and to check things out. So the mother is to eventually hear that there is some racket or some ruckus going on downstairs, eventually hearing the father making a noise or two, and I guess falling over. The mother scrambles to get back into her bed to call the police, and unfortunately, we have the phone cord being ripped from off the wall, and eventually this hand rushing out to grab this mother and pull her under the bed, to have this huge blood being shot out of this bed, and for us to eventually cut to Anton waking up for this morning, not covered in one real true lick of blood, but Anton evidently has a hole ripped out of his shirt. So Anton goes from the attic because Anton's mom was to open the attic to try to call for Anton, but Anton didn't answer. So we are to find out that Anton actually just lives up in the attic. So Anton is to eventually push the attic door to get down to go and talk, or go and take a leisurely breakfast, of course. So Anton is to go and set himself up for some cereal to realize that milk is gone. Anton is to eventually also notice that the dog food is gone. So Anton is taking his headphones off to yell for his mother to mention, like, all these things are gone. So Anton, I guess, had not even realized that his parents have been gone for a number of days. But it is what it is. So Anton is to go and eventually sit on his couch and start to watch TV. And then eventually he is to realize that he is out of weed, because he is to take his asthma inhaler, adjust it to be a bong, and then Anton is to realize that his weed is out. So Anton goes and calls his friend Nub to say, "Hey man, like, my weed's out. Like, I'm out of weed." And Nub is like, "Well, so?" And so Anton is like, "Well, hey, how about you come to my house?" And Nub is like, "Dude, I'm not a delivery service. This isn't like Domino's. This isn't Pizza Hut." And and so Anton is like, "But come on, man, like, I'm comfortable." And so, like, Nub is like, "Well, if you're so comfortable, you can make your way over to my house and uncomfortable your way over there," kind of thing. Uh, so Anton just goes and strolls from his house to his friend's while just wearing a robe, boxers, and a shirt. And so we have Randy, who is this guy that has this gigantic looking truck that is to eventually be wearing like Iron Maiden shirts and all kinds of like death metal music and whatever. So Randy is to notice Anton, and he's like, "Hey, nice shirt there, buddy." And Anton's like, "Ah, whatever." So Anton makes his way to Nub's home by sliding into this window, and so immediately we have both Mick and Nub, who are of course Seth Green and Eldon Henson, uh, and so Anton goes to want to take a hit of one of their bongs, and Mick is like, "Dude, like this is gonna come at a price." And Anton is like, "Come on, you know I'm wiped out." And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, like if anything, if you take a free hit from us, like then we're gonna be out." So both Nub and Mick eventually notice and they call out to Anton that, "Hey, like, it seems like your girlfriend is making her rounds uh, through the neighborhood." And so Anton is eventually to pop his head out of the window to see that Molly is driving through the neighborhood. And so Anton notices that Molly had dropped her notebook, and so he is to scramble to go and get this notebook to give it back to Molly. And Nub mentions to Anton, "Well, hey, how about you make a really good impression on her by actually wearing a pair of pants today here, buddy?" And so Anton asks if Nub has a pair of pants. He does. So Anton goes to get the notebook and make his way to Molly's home. He rings the doorbell, gives her the notebook, and then walks off without saying a word. Molly is to try and thank him or try to stop him, but Anton is just so like he can't say a word that he is to just walk off. So Anton is to go back into his home and just to start watching TV and deciding to make a sandwich. So, uh, Nub and Mick, while at their home, Anton had heard that there had been numerous people being murdered or killed, or in the way of which that Mick says it, like, "Hey, yeah, these two twins at this drive through they got iced. This girl, she got iced. This guy, iced. Iced, iced baby. All of these people, they were killed. They were murdered. They were kind of thing." So Anton eventually is to just go on and make a sandwich, not realizing at all that this blade is covered with blood. So Anton starts making the sandwich, starts slapping mayonnaise on this sandwich, starts slapping this bologna with so now there's just blood all up in this sandwich. So Anton eventually finishes making these sandwiches, and so because there's more than one, there's dose, two sandwiches. So Anton goes and puts the blade back into the mayonnaise jar, which, dude, if you're done, I would not have, I would have just cleaned the blade and be done with my day. But instead, we have Anton who just puts the blade back into the jar and then realizes that there is blood on the knife, and he's like, "Oh my god, the killer is in my house. The killer is here." So Anton goes and scrambles into his parents' bed, has the dog come in with him into this room, and so Anton just shoves a bed sheet over his head and the dog's head to just kind of just be like, "Oh, is something gonna get me? I'm gonna be protected under this bed sheet. I'm sure of it." So eventually, Anton is to try to call out, is to try to literally call out to eventually have someone help him. And then so Anton decides that he is going to basically drag his dog with him through this entire house to see where this killer could quite possibly be. So Anton has his dog like sitting down in one spot, and Anton is just pushing him into the hallway, forcing him to like look where if there might be a killer on the loose. And then we have Anton going and grabbing the collar of his dog to just be like, hey, we're going to do this together kind of thing, forcibly. So Anton is trying to look all over the house to not spot this killer. Because also, while Anton was to put the blade of mayonnaise covered in blood back in the mayonnaise jar, he also sees that his cat was playing around with some eyeball, which is, of course, a telltale sign. If there wasn't numerous things of blood all over Anton's home, because when Anton's mother was to go down to see where her husband was, like she slipped and she fell and she got like covered in blood to where she ran back into her room to eventually call for the police to eventually just die. So, but coincidentally, Anton missed all of that. So Anton is to eventually try and say, well, the only spot that I haven't checked yet is right in front of the house where there are two mannequins placed that have jack-o'-lantern heads on them. And so maybe I'll check if the killer is in either one of these costumes. So Anton goes and tries to check these jack-o'-lanterns to have them fall over on him, and for him to notice that actually both of these jack-o'-lanterns are actually his parents instead. And now Anton is mortified that his parents are both dead. And so we have both Mick and Nub who are to make it to Anton's home. And so Anton is trying to show both Mick and Nub that his parents are dead. And both Mick and Nub have zero interest in what Anton is saying, because they're watching this music video and they're really getting into it. They're like, yeah, this song is jamming. Like, and so Anton is talking and Nub is like, well, wait for the hook. Like, wait. Like, so Anton turns off the TV to force both Nub and Mick to look at these dead bodies. Nub rushes to try and perform CPR on Anton's parents, and Anton is like, dude, they're dead. They're obviously dead. They've probably been dead for days. So they're trying to figure out what the heck to do, and so they're also trying to come up with clues of who could quite possibly be the killer. So eventually they are to go through the house and realize there is a thing written in blood that is to say ant. And so Nub is like, oh my god, did your parents get killed by ants? And Anton is like, no, that's not what that means. And so Nub is like, well, so like, do you have just a very like dangerous ant? Like, what does that mean? What does ant mean? So, Mick is to also realize that it seems there is a sheet of fabric that is in one of the hands of Anton's parents. So Mick grabs it and then is to realize that that this color matches Anton's shirt. So Mick goes and takes the fabric and matches it up with Anton's shirt. And so Mick says, like, oh my god, whoever killed your parents was wearing your shirt, Anton. And Anton's like, oh my god. Like, how could this have happened? So, like, they're coming up with all these consensuses or decisions of who could have killed Anton's parents, and they're really just very dumb. So, if anything, Nub goes and sits and gets comfortable uh, as both Mick and Anton go and raid the fridge to just kind of decide what they're going to do and how they're going to find this killer and whatever. So Mick goes in the fridge and is to go and grab a beer. And so Mick gives this beer to Anton, and Anton immediately breaks the beer and shoves this beer into Mick's head and kills him. So all of a sudden, we are to have Nub, who is kind of looking for something in this kitchen, and so all of a sudden he is to see that now Mick is dead, and so Nub is like, "Oh my God, it must be you. You're the killer." And so Nub starts to run off to go into Anton's basement, and now Anton is realizing that his hand is possessed. It's out of his control. And so Anton tries to tell Nub, "Dude, you're not going to be able to get out of the basement. There's no exit that way, you dummy." And so Anton has his hand drag him down to the basement where Nub is. And so Nub is grabbing all kinds of weapons and stuff to try and get Anton to not kill him. And Anton is telling Nub, it's like, "Dude, I don't want to kill you." And Anton's like, "I don't want to die either." So we have Anton, who is at these stairs, and Nub is telling him, like, "Dude, get out of here, like, get out of the way, like, I want to get out of here, I want to try to escape." And eventually Nub just grabs Anton and tosses him out of the way for Nub to try to get up these stairs. While Nub is trying to do that, Anton, who crashes against this this desk, is to find that there is some circular blade that Anton froze like a frisbee out of his control, and this blade frisbee is to basically chop through Nub's head, having Nub all of a sudden having his head fall back, and his body falls down this flight of stairs. So we have Anton, who is like, "Oh my God, I have killed so many people now, and it obviously must be me because of this hand." So Anton goes and just buries his best friend and his parents, and just immediately I guess assumes that he's probably going to get away with all of this. So as Anton was to make his way from Nub's home at some point, he was to be stopped by two policemen. Two policemen that were to ask him certain questions and eventually see that he had a bag that would resemble that there could quite possibly be weed in it, or it smells like weed. So Anton is like, "Dude, you can't arrest me for a bag." And so the police officers drop the bag on the ground and give Anton a fine for littering. And so Anton had to be forced, since both Mick and Nub would not give him any weed. Anton goes to eventually make both nutmeg and oregano and mixes them together, thinking that maybe he can get high off that because Nub had mentioned it. And so Anton tries that to eventually realize that that is an awful concoction. And eventually he makes a sandwich, which leads him to think that there's a murderer in this home. So Now full circle. So Anton is to uh, bury his friends, and so we have Anton who's giving them the last rites, and all of a sudden he is to start hearing a sound from Mick in his grave. So Anton is saying to Mick, like, hey, how is it that you're still alive? And Mick is like, I don't know. Like, if anything, I think you just knocked me out. And so Mick is consistently asking for Anton to dig him up. And Anton is like, well, I don't know exactly what you are. So Mick digs himself out of this hole. And so Anton is just really afraid of what is going on with Mick. And so Anton kind of pulls back, and eventually we see that evidently Nub's head is not in the ground yet. So Nub's head just awakens, his eyes open, and Nub starts talking to Anton, and that is when Anton is getting really freaked. The other half of Nub's body starts to rise from the grave, and so eventually, when both Anton's friends make their way back into Anton's home, Anton is like, well, are you guys zombies? Like, are you guys like seeking revenge? Like, what? Like, what are you? Like, what are you? And they're like, dude, I don't know. Like, dude, I'm just here. Like, and so Anton is like, well, did you guys die? And so they're like, well, yeah, like, if anything, like we all of a sudden started to see this really bright light and all this like weird, goofy classical music that started to sound like Enya. And like and so uh Anton was like, well, why didn't you go further into that light? And they're like, well, because it was too far. Like, we gave up. Like, if anything, like, that took way too long and that was way too bizarre. So we decided to come back to Earth and just see what happens. So Anton is to figure out that his hand is just all kinds of messed up. So Anton now has to figure out or understand what is his next thing to do, or who would be able to figure out how to take care of this idle hand. So here's the part where we now have to put a pin in this and to now focus on another character. So we have Devi LaCure, um, who is I guess a shaman or some kind of like priestess or something that is to be taking care of supernatural things. And so she is to dress as a nun to make it to this precinct to find a man who had the hand possession before. But when Debbie is to make it to this prison, she finds out that this hand possession is now gone. So Debbie is to make her way to a map of hers uh, in her vehicle to notice that there is a bunch of symbols that are to be connected together to make some satanic looking visual. So Debbie is to realize that there is going to be one location for this hand to be, and so once she makes it to this town, she immediately goes to the bowling alley, thinking that anybody whose hand is possessed would bizarrely be at this bowling alley. So we have Anton, who is trying to figure out how to beat this whole idle hands thing, and so we have uh, we have Anton after his friends have died. Eventually, Anton makes his way to Molly's home forcibly by this hand, and so uh, we have Anton who rings the bell of Molly's home and eventually tries to prevent himself from making it into Molly's house. So he kind of pushes himself off to toss into these bushes. Molly is like, "Aren't you a little old for Ding Dong Ditch?" And Anton is like, "Well, yeah, but I didn't exactly ditch now, did I?" But he didn't say that in exact words. I'm paraphrasing. So Molly is to bring Anton into her home to uh, to eventually kind of thank him uh, for Anton bringing her book back to her. And Anton is like, "Well, yeah, like I read a bit of it." And Molly's like, "What? Like you read my lyrics book?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, like if anything, like there's one song that I really did like. Devil Girl got nothing to lose, got wind in her hair and gum on her shoes." I think that's how it goes. And so Molly was like, "Oh yeah, well I wrote that when I was like really really young." And uh, but Anton was like, "Yeah, but it was great." So eventually, Molly seems to be won over by Anton, and Anton is going to try to win Molly over by this idle hand. So we have Molly that eventually, once her back is turned, and we have Anton's idle hand that goes and grabs Molly onto the butt, and Molly is like, "Wow, like somebody's a bit aggressive." And so Molly was like, "Well, I wasn't exactly sure if you had any kind of feelings for me." And Anton is like, well, maybe I kind of like maybe I do." So Molly eventually pushes Anton onto this bed and they start making out. We eventually have Anton's idle hand who's on the arm of Molly, or on the like elbow of Molly, and so like it's just kind of twiddling its fingers, and so uh, Anton eventually grabs the neck of Molly and tries to choke her out, and either Molly or Anton tries to free the hand away from Molly, but he keeps coming back to the point of Anton going and tying his own hand um, to this bed for them to continue on with their makeout session. So, pushing on to have now Anton needing to uh, be able to figure out how to solve this whole hand business. And so really, Nub and Mick eventually are to tell him, well, it seems that the only person that would have this kind of information about any kind of supernatural or cult-like things is obviously Randy, because he wears like Iron Maiden clothes, and like we are just to naturally like stereotypical to assess that the guy who wears death metal clothes knows everything about the devil and everything that Anton needs to know. So Anton is to try to track down where Randy is, and Randy is at this fast food joint where these twins are to die, to try and have Randy manipulate women because they are grieving. They're grieving over the loss of these two twins that had died. Randy is to go and try to comfort them and to comfort them into a date. And so Anton is to eventually try and talk to Randy, and eventually Randy is to just kind of insult Anton and just kind of like, "Dude, like I'm busy here." Like Randy's like, "Dude, I'm kind of busy here. Like I want nothing to do with what you're asking of me." So Randy loses his girl, and so Randy is like, "Dude, like I thought we were friends, like I thought we were buddies and whatever." And Anton's like, "Well, yeah, we are," but so Randy goes off and just goes into the drive-in of this spot to just go and get food because like he lost his woman. So Anton decides to steal one of the fast food joint uh, clothes from this grave to eventually go in there as a new worker for this fast food joint. Everybody's just assessing or assuming, well, since he has the clothes on, like I think he can just work here. So Anton tells the drive-through guy that is at drive-through, hey, like you can go on your break, and he's like, great. So Anton goes, and Randy is now on the drive-through, and so Anton is to talk to him. And Randy's like, "Oh my God, is that you, Anton?" And he's like, "Yeah, like I really need you. I really need to talk to you about my situation." And so Randy pulls over to the drive-through, and so Anton is asking Randy, "Well, hey, you know a lot about the devil and stuff, right?" And Randy's like, "Well, yeah, sure, I know a number of things." And so eventually Anton is to get to the point of like, "Hey man, like my hand is just like uncontrollable." And like to the point of even in this fast food joint, like we have like Anton's hand that is like throwing knives at people, and so Anton is trying to dip his hands into this like meat batter for him to like mix it up and mix it around. So Randy is to mention, it's like, well, hey, like, you know what? Like, that was the thing for me. That's why I always worked on my truck, because idle hands is the devil's playground, and you need to continuously keep your hands busy. And Anton is like, oh my God, yeah, keep my hands busy. So Anton is to go home and is to start knitting. So Anton is to just continuously start knitting. And so we already have Nub and Mickey, or Mick, who were to mention before that Anton screams like a girl. And so now we have Mick and Nub who are watching over Anton now knitting, and they're like, God, like, what is he going to do next? Like, what is he going to do next? So Mick and Nub are really asking, like, really and truly, how long is Anton going to keep up knitting? And Anton is like, well, as long as it takes. As long as it takes for, like, eventually this hand to give up and for me to have my hand back. So we eventually have two police officers that are to come in here because of come into Anton's house because of a noise complaint. So we have these two police officers going and looking into the window of Anton's home to find Anton knitting with two corpses next to him. And so we have these police officers bust into Anton's home to try and assess this situation, to have these police officers find that both these corpses can talk, and they're thrown off by that. And Anton is now having the knitting shears or the knitting needles, and he's consistently trying to do this thing while talking to these police officers. And so the police are consistently telling Anton to put his hands up, and Anton is like, I can't. And so Anton is desperately starting to realize, like, hey, like, if these people are to arrest me, like, I could be free of all this. So we have Anton that is desperately asking these police officers to cuff him, and the police officers are to mention, well, put the needles down. And Anton is like, I can't do that, cuff me. And they're like, stop, don't move. And he's like, cuff me and cuff me. To the point to where Anton is to eventually take off this sewing needle and be very close to one of the police officers, and he pulls the needle out. He's like, whoa! And so Anton takes his sewing needle and rams it through this guy's ear to ear to have him fall over. Anton, with his idle hand, grabs the taser from the dead police officer to kill the other police officer by tasering him in the head and having him fall over and die. So now they're like the body count is really stacking up. So Anton is just at this point like just so like, dude, there's no way out of this. There's no way around it. Like, I have to take extreme measures, and so Anton decides he needs to chop this hand off. So Anton goes into the kitchen to try and find this like bagel like guillotine like thing. And so Anton puts his hand in this bagel thing, and Nub is like, dude, that wouldn't even cut my bagels. It's not going to cut your hand. So Anton tries to cut this, cut his hand with this bagel cutter, and he's like, ha ha ha, and it doesn't cut his hand. So we have Anton that is taking a like a cleaver and is trying to chop off his hand, but his hand repetitiously keeps moving. And so we have Anton who has Nub's head on the counter while Mick and Anton are watching Anton try to like cut off his hand. Like, we had Anton ask for Mick to give him the electric knife, but when Mick is to get the electric knife and mention, look at me, I'm the Leatherface, and so Anton takes the electric knife and unplugs it, and then the electric knife stops working, and so they're like, well, that was a pointless endeavor. So eventually Anton just takes and has Nub bite down on Anton's hand, and so Nub is telling Anton not to cut him. So Anton takes the cleaver and chops off his own hand. Nub is to spit out Anton's hand, and so Mick immediately rushes to get a clothing iron to press against Anton's wound, and so Mick is mentioning that, hey man, like we need to like cover up the wound, and we need to get some antiseptic and some like some kind of like stuff to be able to have this infection not get really bad. Did you ever watch ER? Did you ever watch ER? Yes, you probably did. So, or maybe that show was so long ago that people don't even know what ER is anymore. So, besides emergency room. So, Seth is to scramble out of here with Nub to eventually get antiseptic and to eventually get also burritos and come back. So Anton is to just be happy that his hand is now gone from him and almost passes out from, I guess, blood loss. So eventually Anton is to realize on the ground there is this there's writing that is to say, big mistake, Anton. And so now Anton is just kind of paranoid. He's just like, okay, like, this hand is still alive. Where is it? And so the hand tries to attack Anton and try to get at him, but eventually Anton is to toss his hand into a microwave and nuke it, and Anton again is thinking that he has won, that he has beat this, and if anything, the hand is still going to be stuck in this microwave. So Anton eventually is to I think there's a moment here where I'm forgetting. So eventually Mick and Nub are to make it back to Anton's house and come with burritos, and so uh, they open up the microwave to have the hand come flying out, and so they're like, ah, well, screw it. Like, like if anything, we didn't know the hand was in the microwave. We didn't pay any attention. But Nub is to realize that the microwave is all bloodied up, and he's like, well, maybe we should clean the microwave. And Mick is like, yeah, like let's go and just clean up the whole entire house after that, you dummy. Like, no, I'm not going to clean up the whole entire house. So they nuke the burritos, and then they go and eat them. And so Anton eventually is to go back into the kitchen to realize that the hand is now gone. And so uh, Anton is now mad at Mick and Nub for letting this hand loose. Eventually, Anton naturally assumes that this hand is going to go after Molly, and so Anton scrambles to make his way to Molly's home, and Molly's like, "Well, hey, like, uh, if anything, like, I'm going to the Halloween dance. Like, if anything, because that's the only thing that we can do because there's curfew going on. So, hey, if you want to come with me, uh, like, uh, like, get your costume ready." So Anton is like, well, yeah, like I've already had my costume ready. Like I'm like the drive-through killer with his hand missing, and so Molly's just like, okay, whatever. So, uh, so we push on to eventually have this hand make its way to this dance. So we have Randy who is at this bowling alley with Debbie, um, because Randy is going and doing bowling with two of his friends, which I guess are both both Tiffany and God. That's when you hate it when you have to look through names. It doesn't matter. Tiffany and Tiffany and some other guy. Tiffany and Curtis. There we go. Oh my God! Thank God for that. So Tiffany and Curtis are saying that they're going to the Halloween dance, and they are dressing up as the Kiss Army. So or the Kiss Band. They're basically dressing up like a Kiss Army member. That's what I was trying to go with here. So they go off to this dance, and Randy is like, you know what? I think I'm gonna go and look if there's any like last women that are around that I can like try to like smooth talk over. So Randy eventually finds Debbie in this bowling alley, and Debbie is to tell Randy the immediate truth that she is here to try to take down a possessed hand. And Randy's like, no, like, you know what? I actually have a friend of mine who has this problem with his hand. Maybe this problem is one and the same. And Debbie's like, let's go. So Randy and Debbie make it to this dance, uh, and so Anton, Mick, and Nub are naturally assuming that this hand is going to make its way to this dance as well because it's the only thing going on in town. So all three of them go to the dance, and so immediately we are to have the hand get very busy and start killing people. So both Curtis and Tiffany are in their car, making out and eventually getting to the point of them starting to have some sex in their car. So eventually, this girl that Curtis is with is to eventually take off her top, and eventually, Curtis is to go down on her in this car, and eventually, Curtis is holding on to Tiffany's chest, let's just say, and eventually, we are to find out that there is a third hand in between this girl's chest, and Tiffany is just like, this feels good, but eventually it is a little bit too good. So Tiffany is to look down to realize there is a third hand present that goes and grabs her neck and chokes her out. Curtis is to realize what is to go on, and Curtis is to try to leave his car to eventually have his head being crushed into his door and killed. So when Anton, Mick, and Nub make it to this dance, immediately they are to see that there are two dead people in a car. So Anton opens this door of this car to see a guy fall out and he is dead. So they immediately notice that the hand is already at work killing people. So all three of them are to go on to this dance, and so Nub is like, well, what a shame, and Mick was like, yeah, they're so young, and Nub was like, no, like, it's a shame because of that ass, like, that woman, and Mick is like, well, yeah, like, I guess Curtis died with a smile on his face, so, like, because I guess they were in the throes of passion, so, going into this dance, so, I think Nub or Mick were thinking that they could probably win for best costume at this party. So they go on, and so Molly and I think Tanya, who is Molly's best friend in this movie, is to. I'm not going to spend time looking this. And Tanya, there we go. So, because it will probably matter, because eventually Tanya does a thing in this movie too. But anyways, so Molly and Tanya are talking, and so Tanya is asking Molly, like, hey, it seems like, penny for your thoughts, like you got something on your mind, and because Molly's just kind of going through the motions of dancing, and Molly's like, well, I would have assessed or assumed that Anton would have been here by now, and so Tanya's like, well, yeah, like, I bet, like, you can't wait for him to get here. And so that way you can just start loving and making out with him and whatever. Uh, so pushing on to have this whole dance thing go on. So, we are to eventually have a principal who is to do this 900 number where he is to have like phone sex. So we have this principal who is calling this 900 number, confirming his credit card, and is now talking to this woman and getting into the moment. And we all of a sudden have this hand that is to start to crawl up this guy's pants leg and inside this guy's pants. And so this principal who is to be like, well, like, you know what, I'm feeling actually so good by this moment that I think that you're like actually touching me. And then so all of a sudden, like, these pants rip open with this hand there to go and just destroy this guy's wang, this guy's down belows. And so this principal is died by, I guess, dick separation. Whoops. Anyways, so we have this hand that is now putting its hand into this pencil sharpener to eventually sharpen its fingertips, I guess, to showcase that these nails of this hand is all of a sudden getting sharper, like you see here. So this hand is even more deadlier than it was before. So Anton eventually scrambles to make his way into this Halloween dance to eventually tell everybody that they are going to die, that there is a hand here that is coming after people, and eventually they are going to die. We have the lead singer that is telling Anton, like, dude, like, you're hogging up this party, like, you gotta get out of here. And all of a sudden we are to see this hand who is to lock the dance doors, and eventually this hand is to reappear by falling from a good distance onto this lead singer's head and tear this guy's skin off of this guy's head to basically just scalp him and have him fall over. So everybody is freaking out, but from what they have seen. So we have both Tanya and Molly who decide to go into this ventilation shaft to try to get out of here because they can't get out of here through any of these doors. So both Tanya and Molly scramble to make their way through this ventilation shaft, try to stop this fan from going off so that way they can kind of sleek out of there, and so they do. And so Molly is to grab this rope from Tanya's devil costume, and so Molly just slings down from this rope, and now Molly is asking Tanya to do the same, and Tanya can't. Eventually, the hand is making its way to Tanya, and so this devil rope ends up getting retrieved back up to where Tanya is, and Molly's asking, "Why did you retrieve the rope?" And Tanya's like, "I didn't do that." All of a sudden, we have the rope that is now turned into a noose and is now choking Tanya. Tanya falls down to where Molly is to eventually have her be choked out, and then the hand is to go and take the shoe that was stopping the fan from moving. The hand pulls that shoe out to have this rope start to recede back into the fan, and eventually Tanya just gets chopped up through this fan and killed. So both Mick and Nub make their way through this ventilation shaft where both Tanya and Molly had went, and they go the exact same route that Molly and Tanya had went. So eventually they are to find that Molly, I guess, had gotten away, but Tanya is now dead. And so Mick tells Nub, "Well, I guess you're not getting any tonight." So they fall down to eventually make their way to try and find Molly. So Anton eventually is to bump into Debbie and Randy, and Debbie is trying to kill Anton, but Anton is like, "Dude, my hand is chopped off and it's not with me anymore." And Debbie's like, "Well, that was a stupid mistake." And Anton is like, "Well, I know that now. I didn't realize it then." So Debbie is to mention that she has some knife in hand that is to take down this hand. So, and also that they have only a very brief time before Anton's Molly is to be chosen by this hand to be killed, to be sent to hell, which I'm not even understanding what exactly that is to do shortly thereafter that. Like, if the hand does kill Molly, does that just usher in everyone from hell to is there going to be hands, like a million hands coming from hell to kill everyone? What is to happen after that? I guess it doesn't matter. So everyone is scrambling to eventually figure out where this hand is. Debbie, Anton, Randy, and Mick and Nub. So they all eventually go into the auto shop of this school and eventually find that the hand is there, and that the hand has already tied Molly to this car, and she is to be propped up for this car to eventually crush into this wall that has this demonic symbol in it. So the hand is pressing this lever as this hand is now wearing some kind of puppet costume to eventually press this lever to have this car go up. And so we have all three, Anton, Nub, and Mick, trying to stop this hand from pressing this lever, but they're trying to figure out how to become strong. And so Seth is to see this weird Mighty Joe Bong, and so we have both Mick and Nub going and getting high to, I guess, get strong. And so Anton eventually also goes and takes a huge whiff of this bong. And Molly's like, dude, are you seriously just getting high right now? But there's a whole reason for that. Anton goes and blows into the puppet thing to get this puppet high, which immediately has the puppet's eyes roll back into his head, and the hand falls over for Anton to stop what is to go on. So Debbie and Randy make their way back to where all the others are, and so Anton eventually, so we would eventually have this hand eventually come back to life and eventually start lunging to try to kill more people. And so Deb goes and tosses her knife that is to eventually hit this hand and then eventually hit Mick in the chest and eventually just kill off this hand, and it just disappears. And Mick is like, dude, that's it? Like, that's all? Like, and they're just like, well, yeah, I guess. So Randy and Deb are like, dude, I guess that's a wrap. Well, let's go and let's have some sex then. Like the pre-ritual sex moment. So they go off. So both Mick and Nub, considering this whole thing is resolved, are, I guess, to be called back up to heaven. And we have Anton, who had freed Molly from her car clutches, and we find that Anton is underneath this car. Evidently, by mistake, that this lever had gotten loose, and all of a sudden Anton is crushed under this car. And so with both Nub and Mick making their way onto heaven, they ask if Anton wants to go as well. We cut to Anton, who is at this hospital bed with, I guess, every single one of his bones crushed and whatever. Molly mentions that Anton had given up heaven so that way he can stay with Molly and continue to date her and whatever. And Anton was like, well, yeah, of course. Like, I would have given up everything to stay here with you, kind of thing. So Nub and Mick eventually reappear to Anton as angels, and Anton thought that, like, oh, so, like, you guys, like, didn't go to heaven after all? And they're like, oh, no, we're just angels now. So they're there to protect over Anton, and so Anton is like, well, great. And so they mention, it's like, well, hey, man, do you need anything? And he's like, well, hey, go and get me some, like, cookies or something. So they go to some vending machine, and Anton goes and rests in his bed to realize, and in the ceiling on the bed it says, I'm under the bed. And Anton freaks out and screams like a girl. And both Mick and Mick and Nub walk out of this hospital, or walk out of this spot with mentioning, yeah, Anton really does scream like a girl, and that they had pulled that prank on Anton to freak him out, and I guess it did work. So they start walking off to, I guess, get the vending machine food and call it a day. So I think I'm going to call it a day with this review. I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.